welcome to Journeys and Journals. I'm Bernie Martin Beck, and I get to interview the most interesting people. Very often it's the number one person of some piece of history, and that's about my guest today. It is about the University of Oregon, but my guest, Gene, you're the first what?
First man nurse to graduate from the University of Oregon School of Nursing. There had been several other who tried and for various reasons didn't make it, and I was successful.
Well, I remember in local history here that we had men nurses, but they weren't from Oregon.
Well, there have been men nurses for a long time. As a matter of fact, in nursing, it was really started by men from religious orders way back when, early history. And I worked with a man nurse at the University of Oregon Hospital who had graduated from a program in Nebraska in 1930. So they've been around for a while, but they have, up until now, have been rather rare, but it's getting more and more in their favor as time goes on.
And would you introduce us to your wife?
Yes, this is my wife, Glenna Cooper, it used to be, but she doesn't use that name anymore.
No, not since I'm married to you.
And
Glenna
how long
Mitchell.
have you and Glenna been married?
Well, as of last Christmas Day,
We got married on Christmas Day.
it was 59 years. We got,
Oh, congratulations. And how about a big party on the 60th?
I wouldn't be surprised with what it might happen. I don't know.
Well, why don't we go, now that we know your connection with Eugene, or were you in Portland at the time?
In Portland,
That's where the
Portland.
School of Nursing
Yes.
was.
up on the hill, as they say, on Sam Jackson Park Street, Road, or Avenue. And the county hospital, Multnomah County Hospital, was also there. There were two hospitals there on the hill that we did our clinical practice in.
Well, I was so lucky as to go up on that hill, but they didn't keep me there. They said I wasn't either good enough or bad enough, I don't know which, to go in the research project.
Couldn't be bad enough.
My cancer didn't fit the criteria that they were looking for, but here I am 5 years later. I'm cancer-free, and
Praise the Lord.
I'm glad that there were doctors and nurses that helped me out because, but you didn't start out in Portland. Let's start back. Where did you get born?
Where did I get born? Do you remember that? Huh?
He taught me.
Yeah. I was born on Blossom Street in Houston, Texas.
Oh, sounds.
Yeah.
Where's that accent?
September the 11th, 1930.
Okay, well, you're a little ahead of me. Gene, what was Texas like?
Well, during the early years there, I don't remember it very well, but in living there for a few years, we lived out in West Texas, which is a lot different than Houston. Houston is warm, and the humidity will get you. It's just really oppressive. But out in West Texas, we were cotton farmers and had a dairy. So I milked cows and picked cotton, hoed cotton, and did all that kind of stuff. Good way to grow up, really. I didn't think of that then, but it is now.
No. Well, when did nursing kind of come into your life back then in Texas?
No, it was here.
Oh, but in
Yes.
Texas, you had a nurse in your
No,
neighborhood?
Well, they had the nurse in the neighborhood, yes.
What's that story?
Well, I have a picture at home that reminds me of what happened in 1936. It was the year I started school. And anyhow, we lived next door to a nurse, an elderly gal who had retired. And one day there was a knock at our front door, and my mother answered it. And it was this tall, good-looking Texas man who introduced himself to her as Lyndon Baines Johnson. At that time, he was a congressman. But anyhow, he came to our house simply. He was inquiring as to where his neighbor was, who was a nurse who was present at his birth or Johnson City, Texas is now. That's
Well, you mean he was interested in history too, his own personal history?
Yes. Well, I think that probably is a part, much more of a part of the people's lives in the South than it is in the North. That's my observation anyhow. It seems that we spend a lot more time going out to cemeteries and checking graves and doing that sort of thing.
What was your mom's reaction to meeting Lyndon?
Well, I don't know, but I suspect that her blood pressure probably went up and her pulse, but she she shook hands with him, and we kidded her, as long as she was still alive, about not washing her hands after that little incident.
Oh my. Now, did you know your mother-in-law? Yeah.
Well,
My mother.
yes.
Yeah. Now, what brought you out west? That's what we always want to know.
What brought us out west? Well, we had a friend. We moved when we left Texas the first time. We came twice. The first time we moved to Colorado on our way out here and stayed there a couple of years. My dad wanted to put us. There were 6 of us in our family too.
Ooh, wow.
Wanted to put us in a church school, and there was one in Colorado Springs. And we got very well acquainted with one of the teachers, and that teacher, who was actually a minister, he decided to move west, and he moved to Grants Pass, Oregon in 1938, I think it was. And anyhow, he wrote back and told us what a marvelous place it was to live, and he had grown up in Texas, and so we knew what he was talking about when he said, well, I'll tell you what. He says, I really believe that we've moved to Canaan and we've gotten out of Egypt. And we followed them out. The next year we followed them out here to Grants Pass, and he was the pastor of the Nazarene church that was located down by where the Daily Courier is now, that parking lot just across the road there.
Now, let's get you into school here, because I want to hear about this University of Oregon. What
Okay.
took you there?
Well, okay, I had a sister who was, by the way, was a missionary in Papua New Guinea for 38 years, and she just passed away this last August. She worked as a nurse's aide at Josephine County Hospital, the old hospital up on the
Where
hill.
I was born.
Is that right? We had a couple of children born there too before we left here. But anyhow, and then I had a brother who was an orderly, had off and on, and so I had an interest in hospital work, and so there was an opening came up at Roseburg VA Hospital in 1952, and Glenn and I had been married about a year and a half, a little over. Anyhow, I went up there and got myself hired in September of 52. I think I said that already, but anyhow, and I liked that work. Working at that time, of course, we're still doing wholesale electroshock treatment and prefrontal lobotomies. If you've ever seen the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, that's a very accurate picture of what it used to be like in mental hospitals. But I liked it, and we started having children, and I could see that I was never make it, financially, with just being an aide or nursing assistant, as they call them in the VA. And anyhow, after I'd worked there about 4 years, I decided that with the encouragement of my brother-in-law, who was on the faculty at University of Colorado, would start nursing school. And I had a tough time of it because I had to work and go to school, and I fell and injured my back and a lot of things that kind of interrupted it. But so we came back to Oregon, and I was taking the necessary what we call pre-nursing classes at Portland State University. And I was working at a Multnomah County juvenile home, as a group supervisor for the kids who were some delinquent and some were dependent, just foster home maneuvers, I guess you could call it. Anyhow, I injured my back again, and I couldn't go back to work there. It was too strenuous a work. And so I inquired from vocational rehab, and they said that they did some testing, and they said, well, they'd like to back me if I really knew what I wanted to do. And I did know what I wanted to do.
A capable young man who needed something
Yes.
wasn't so physical.
Anyhow, I went back there to Colorado for that one semester and injured my back, and I moved back to Oregon. I wanted to come back to where I felt a little more at home, and anyway and I went up at the year that I had my back operated on. I have a fusion and a couple of discs that were removed, and anyhow they said that they would help me if I really wanted to do it, and I said I really want to do it. So they helped not very much. Actually, I still had to work about 35 hours a week, which I did for about 2.5 years, working almost full time and going to school. And the people would ask me, "Well, how do you manage that? How do you manage to?" And at one point, I had 2 jobs and was going to school. And I said, "Well, it isn't, really easy, but I said it's somewhat like having a gun held to your head. I got 6 mouths at home to feed." Anyhow, well,
6
I made
babies.
it. I made it, and with a lot of help.
Oh.
With a lot of help. After I walked down off the stage when they gave me my diploma, my wife and 5 of the children at that time were born, and they were sitting on the front row in the medical library up there. And I walked over and I gave my wife the diploma.
Oh, how sweet.
And we got a standing ovation. Anyhow.
Oh, I love that story. Now, so you were in Portland, you were in Roseburg, you are now coming south to Grants Pass, and you kept on going.
Went to, before I ever went up to Roseburg, I graduated from Grants Pass High School in 1948. Same year that Sherm Heater and some of the other people here in town that are better known than I am. Anyhow, I had finished my high school here, and then when I got through, I had been working on the psychiatric ward at the medical school hospital while I was going to school, and while they got to know me pretty well, and anyhow, my advisor said, if you want to go to graduate school, you ought to do it now. Don't wait. And a lot of people think you ought to work 2 or 3 years before you go to graduate. But I was mature enough and knew what I wanted to do, and I said that I did want to go to graduate school. And anyhow, out of that, I went back to Colorado in 1964 after I had my bachelor's degree, and took about 2 years, nearly 2 years, to get my master's degree.
This is one hard-working guy. Man, I'm impressed.
Now you know why I'm having to use a walking cane to get around.
Uh-huh. I saw that.
Yeah.
Now, what's the Ashland connection?
Okay, when I came out of graduate school, I went up to Roseburg, where I had left there as a GS3. I don't know if you're familiar with the way the government. And I went back and ended up with them as a GS12.
Okay,
And
now
after I had my master's degree and stuff. And
you started out the first time you worked for the VA?
GS1, step 1.
Oh boy.
Right at the bottom.
Somehow you can relate to that.
Yes. My first year there, when I was a GS1, every other Wednesday was payday, and I got $83 and some odd cents. That was on my week's work after they got through taking stuff out.
For 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! How in the world did you manage?
We did. Good Lord took care of us.
Well, I found these folks in a beautiful, beautiful home. First time I'd ever met him, I just sort of knocked on the door and had been invited by a neighbor. Told his name is your neighbor introduced me to
Oh,
you.
yes. Their name is Roberta Walters, Roberta and Russ Walters.
I just was passing through an airport and visiting, as I do with folk. Then they said, oh, you ought to meet the neighbor across the street. He lives in the Ben Bones house.
Yes.
Now, that has story there too, because he was the gladiola grower.
Yes.
Were those fields glads right around your place?
Not when we bought, but they had been a few years before that, and he also had bulb fields down off of M Street down in that area.
Oh, in those years, you'd see, they didn't sell glads for flowers. There wasn't this air transport of cut flowers. So they just cut those, and then it was the bulb was important. So that's why we had the Gladiola Festival here, which was second only to the Rose Festival in Portland, which was second only to the Rose Festival
right.
in Pasadena. Now, let's get you over to Ashland. What in the world were you doing over there?
Well, I came when I came back and I went to work up at the VA. I was made almost immediately assistant chief nurse. And I really wasn't that much into administration. I wanted more to be involved clinically,
Okay.
working directly with the patients. And at about that same time, one of the nurses who had been one of my operating room teachers up at the medical school took a job as starting the nursing program at Southern Oregon College. She was director of nursing education, and she knew me, and they were bringing some students for clinical practice up to Roseburg, and she got me aside one day, and she says, "How would you like to teach?" And I said, "I love it."
Oh,
You know,
boy.
it gave me a legitimate reason for talking all the time, but
I agree with that. No.
anyhow, she talked me into coming down and helping. There were four of us, four instructors and one director, and we all had to write up our curriculum. I had the mental health and psychiatric nursing curriculum I had to write up, and taught it there for three years. And again, my kids were getting older, wanting to go to college, and I couldn't make it really on the teacher's pay at that point in time. That was 1968 to 1971. And the VA wanted me back, and they gave me about a $5,000 a year increase in my pay.
Oh, money talks, doesn't
Yes,
it?
yes, surely did. And so I went back to work at the VA out at White City, the domiciliary. Started a mental health clinic. They didn't have anything like that. And started an alcohol treatment program. And anyhow, so that's where I retired from there. So that's how I ended up in Ashland. All 6 of our children graduated from Ashland High School, and immediately started going to college.
Okay, name them from number 1 kid.
Oh, Randy, Rhonda, Ryan, Royce, Russell, and Rayburn.
Rayburn, you got down to a few.
Well, we allowed my mother to name him because he was born on her birthday.
Oh, how
And
exciting.
it had to start with R and not be totally ridiculous. Well, I don't know whether you remember Sam Rayburn, who was Speaker of the House
I do.
from Texas for many years. And of course, Robert E. Lee, everybody knew him. She named him Rayburn Lee.
A good Southern lady. She wanted. Well, the idea of the 2 of you getting together, let's get down to that. Where did you meet?
We met right here in Grants Pass. I was going to the Nazarene Church, and her dad was pastor of First Church of God, Anderson, Indiana, First Church of God here in town. And she came home from college. She had been going to Cascade College, a small church school in Portland. She came home, and got somewhat acquainted with her the first summer she was here. And then she went back up there, and I visited her, went up there a time or two. And anyhow, I knew what I wanted for sure. And she didn't really, I don't think, knew that yet. But anyhow, And when she came home the second summer, I talked her out of going back to school and getting married instead. I didn't have to talk very hard.
And that was how long ago?
That was in 1951 that we got married. Christmas Day, 1951.
So he can't forget it. It's on Christmas Day.
And the anniversaries, you know, it's easy to forget those. That's what they tell me. Other guys have a hard time remembering them, but I don't.
Well,
Christmas Day.
now the interesting thing is that with all these moves, the kids probably have a broad roots. They just know they came from Oregon, huh?
Well, yeah, and they know their dad came from Texas.
Okay, you'll never let them forget that.
I didn't wear my Dallas Cowboys cap today, but I've been.
I think it's tattooed all across there. I'm from Texas. Now,
To show off, you wear that.
they tell me a little bit about you, your world. What are these pictures about?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what pictures you're talking about, but my world, as seen by these pictures, of course, started when I was the year I started school in Austin, Texas, and I've always made good grades when I tried. There were a time or two that I got a little careless.
We relate to that.
And I suffered corporal punishment for doing badly one year. Yeah, I got good licking.
From whom?
And I didn't,
Dad.
my dad. Anyhow, and I didn't make bad grades anymore.
Oh,
It worked.
It worked.
It's a little severe, I guess, but I'm from the old school, I guess. I can accept it.
Well, now how many of these kids got taught that way by you?
Oh, we were rather liberal, usually just paddling with our hand, you know.
And they grew up just fine.
They grew up fine. All five of our sons went to Northwest Nazarene College in Nampa, Idaho, starting in 1975. Two of them went together. 1976, the third one went over, so we had three of them in college at the same time. And then later on, the other two all graduated with a bachelor's degree, and one of the sons is in music education. He's the one I was telling you about. And I'll bring some CDs when we come, and it's in the quartet. He taught music, band and choral music.
And
He's a bass like his dad.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you do singing?
Yes.
Have you
Some.
heard of Liberty Quartet?
No.
I haven't, but I'll look forward to
You will after
Liberty
a while.
Quartet.
Yeah. Liberty. They come to Grants Pass quite
Well,
often.
they travel from all over the West Coast.
And as far back as the East Coast too, Philadelphia and
And I have to tell you, he's a bass like his father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Now-
one we're talking
now
about.
he's much better bass than I am.
Oh, he is.
Oh yes.
Well, everybody should get a little better. But you have some grandkids.
15 grandchildren. We have 10 grandsons and 5 granddaughters, and 2 of the granddaughters one's in Southern Nazarene University in Bethany, Oklahoma, which is a suburb of Oklahoma City. Another one is where the boys went, at Northwest Nazarene University over in Idaho. And we got a grandson who was at Washington State University in his junior year, I think it is. So.
Obviously, education's very important to you folk, to your family.
Yes.
And you've infused that into that's a wonderful, wonderful heritage.
Well, yeah, I think it is, particularly in view of the fact that my father didn't really push that. He didn't think that, he thought education actually could do a lot of harm. And I guess it can, depending on what kind of education and where you're getting it. You know.
Now, his education was what?
8th grade.
And Mom, what did she?
She had 1 year of college at Pasadena and is now Point Loma university, Nazarene University down in near San Diego, but it was at Pasadena for a lot of years, and she and her brother traveled out there in a Model T Ford.
Oh, I love to hear those stories from Texas out to California.
Even got a picture or two of that where they were having a flat tire in Arizona somewhere and had to stop.
Oh.
She had 1 year, and then she met my dad.
Well, that sounds a little familiar. Well, you have stories. I'm just fascinated. What do you do on the land now that you're out there with the farm? And you've been there how many years?
30 years.
30 years.
We bought it 32 years ago, but our daughter and her husband, who worked for Richard's Market, they lived in it for 2 years, and then we came over. After the last boy graduated from June the 11th, 1981 is when we actually moved all of our stuff in. I'd been coming over, working on the place for a while.
Well, I really welcome you to the whole state of Oregon. It sounds like you've just hip-hopped back and forth, and
Texas.
And Texas, too. Thank you so much for being our guests, and we appreciate men who have ventured into new areas of work, because the men nurses, other than wartime, we knew about the men that went in as non-combatants and because they didn't want to bear arms, but this is a whole wonderful story, and I remember one male nurse here in Grants Pass when I was a kid. His name was Starr. Don't remember his first name, but if you do, call us at Better Life TV. Thank you both for being my guests. Thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
Well,
And
thank
God,
you for having us.
we sure do appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Bernie Martin Beck saying thank you very much for tuning in. See you next week.